3 months. That is how long my biological father had been dead when I found out he even existed. I want you to sit with that for a second. Imagine living your entire life not knowing where you came from, not knowing whose eyes you inherited, or why you are the only one in your family who cannot stand the taste of cilantro. Imagine being at peace with those questions, making peace with never having the answers. And then imagine that one random Tuesday afternoon while you are eating a ham sandwich in the back of your furniture shop, your phone buzzes with an email that changes everything you thought you knew about yourself. My name is Logan Bennett. I am 36 years old. I restore antique furniture in a small town in Lexington, Kentucky that most people have never heard of. I drive a truck that is older than some of my employees. I have been married for 8 years to a woman named Emily who laughs at my bad jokes and makes the best chili in 3 counties. I have a good life, a simple life, the kind of life where the biggest decision I make most days is whether to use oak stain or walnut. I was adopted when I was 3 days old. My parents, David and Carol Bennett, brought me home from the hospital wrapped in a blue blanket that my mom still keeps in a cedar chest in her bedroom. They told me I was adopted when I was 5 years old. I remember sitting in our living room, the one with the green carpet and the wood-paneled walls, while my dad knelt down and explained that I grew in another woman's belly, but I was born to be their son. My mom was crying, but she was smiling too. She said, "You were chosen, Logan. We picked you, and we would pick you again every single time." I never searched for my birth parents. I never felt like anything was missing. My mom and dad gave me everything I needed. They taught me how to work hard, how to treat people right, how to show up even when I do not feel like it. I figured whoever my biological parents were, they made the right call giving me up because I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be. Then Emily bought me a DNA test kit for my 36th birthday. She thought it would be fun. She said, "Let us find out if you are secretly royalty or something." I laughed. I spit in the little tube, sealed it up, and dropped it in the mail. I forgot about it completely. 6 weeks later, I got a notification that my results were ready. I opened the app during my lunch break expecting to see a pie chart telling me I was 60% German and 40% who knows what. Instead, I saw a match, a close family match, the closest you can get. The name on the screen said Charles Whitman, and next to it one word father. I did not recognize the name. I had never heard it before in my life, so I did what anyone would do. I opened Google and typed it in. The first result was an obituary. Charles Whitman, billionaire industrialist and founder of Whitman Industrial Manufacturing, had died 10 weeks earlier. Pancreatic cancer. He was 68 years old. He left behind a wife named Elizabeth and no children. Except that was not true. He did leave behind a child. He left behind me. I sat on the floor of my shop for a long time. My sandwich got cold. The sunlight moved across the room. I just sat there staring at my phone, trying to understand what I was looking at. This man, this stranger with my DNA, had built an empire. He owned factories. He owned a yacht. He owned a penthouse in downtown Boston. And according to everything I was reading, he died without ever knowing I existed. That is what I thought. Anyway, I was wrong about that too. 3 days later, my phone rang. A Boston number. A man's voice, calm and professional, said, "Mr. Bennett, my name is Michael Carter. I am an attorney representing the estate of Charles Whitman. I need to speak with you about an urgent matter. Your biological father spent the last weeks of his life searching for you. He found you, and he left you everything." I almost hung up. I thought it was a scam. I thought someone was messing with me. Then Michael said something that made my whole body go cold. He said, "Mr. Bennett, I also need to inform you that 3 days before your father died, someone filed an emergency petition to remove your name from his will. They tried to erase you completely. They almost succeeded." I asked him who would do something like that, who would try to block a dying man's final wish. He said his wife, Elizabeth Whitman. And when you hear why she did it, you will understand why your father was so desperate to find you before it was too late. I did not know it yet, but that phone call was the first step into a world I never asked to be part of. A world of lawyers and lies and family secrets that had been buried for 35 years. A world where I discovered that the woman who gave birth to me had written me a letter every single year of my life, never sending them, just hoping that someday I would read them. A world where I learned that my father did not abandon me because he did not want me. He abandoned me because someone convinced him it was the only way. This is the story of how a DNA test turned my life upside down. How I inherited $100 million from a man I never met. How I discovered the truth about why I was given away. And how I finally learned that I was wanted all along. I just did not know it until everyone who could have told me was already gone. Let me tell you about my life before that phone call because I need you to understand what I was walking away from when I stepped into Charles Whitman's world. I wake up every morning at 6 a.m. Not because I have to, but because my body has done it for so long that it does not know any other way. I make coffee in a machine that is held together by hope and duct tape. I drink it black, standing at my kitchen window watching the sky turn from purple to pink to gold over the cornfields behind my house. Emily is usually still asleep. She is a night owl. I am an early bird. Somehow we make it work. By 6:30, I am in my truck heading to the shop Second Life Furniture. I named it that because everything I work on has already lived one life, and I am giving it a chance to live another. The shop is in a converted barn about 4 miles outside of town. Red paint that is peeling in places. A hand-painted sign that Emily made me when I first opened the doors 8 years ago. Inside it smells like sawdust and linseed oil and history. People bring me their grandmother's rocking chairs, their great-aunt's hope chests, their father's writing desks. They bring me pieces that have been in their families for generations. Pieces that are falling apart but too precious to throw away, and I fix them. I strip the old, finish repair the joints, sand down the scratches, and bring the wood back to life. There is something sacred about that work, holding something that someone's hands touched 50 or 100 years ago. Making it beautiful again, making it useful again. I do not make a lot of money. Some months are better than others, but I make enough. Enough to pay the mortgage on our little house. Enough to take Emily out to dinner on Fridays. Enough to live a life that feels honest and good. My parents live about 10 minutes away. David and Carol Bennett, the two best people I have ever known. My dad retired 5 years ago after 30 years as a mail carrier. He walked the same routes for 3 decades, knew every dog by name, remembered everyone's birthdays. People still stop him at the grocery store to say hello. He is the kind of man who fixes things instead of replacing them, who says what he means, and means what he says, who taught me that a man's word is the only currency that really matters. My mom was a hospice nurse for 27 years. She held the hands of dying strangers and helped their families say goodbye. She came home exhausted most nights, but she never complained. She said it was holy work being present at the end of someone's story, making sure they were not alone. Every Sunday, Emily and I drive over to their house for dinner. Mom makes pot roast or chicken and dumplings, or meatloaf with mashed potatoes. Dad tells the same stories he has been telling for years, and we laugh like we are hearing them for the first time. After dinner, we sit on the porch and watch the fireflies come out. Sometimes nobody says anything for a long time. We just sit there together, and that is enough. That is the life I had. That is the life I thought I would always have. I never felt incomplete being adopted. I never lay awake at night wondering about my birth parents. When I was 12, I went through a phase where I asked a lot of questions. Who were they? Why did they give me up? Did they ever think about me? My mom sat me down and said something I have never forgotten. She said, "Logan, I do not know who they were, but I know they loved you because giving you up must have been the hardest thing they ever did. And they did it so you could have a better life. That is not abandonment. That is a sacrifice. I carried those words with me for 23 years. They were enough. They filled in the blank spaces in my story and let me move forward without looking back. Then Emily bought me that DNA test. It was a birthday gift, a joke almost. She wrapped it in funny paper with little cartoon dogs on it and said, "I figured it is time we find out if you are secretly related to anyone famous." I laughed. I was not curious, not really. But she was excited, so I played along. I followed the instructions, spit in the tube, sealed the box, dropped it in the mail, and then I forgot about it completely. I had a backlog of projects at the shop. I had life to deal with. The DNA test became just another thing I had done and moved on from. 6 weeks later, my phone buzzed with an email. My results were ready. I was sitting in the back of my shop eating a ham sandwich when I opened the app. I expected percentages. I expected to find out I was mostly Irish or German or maybe something surprising like Greek. I expected a pie chart and some fun facts about my ancestry. What I got instead was a name, Charles Whitman Father. And just like that, the life I thought I knew started to crumble. I stared at that name on my phone screen until my eyes burned. Charles Whitman. Father. 2 words that made no sense together. 2 words that rewrote everything I thought I knew about my own life. My hands were shaking when I typed his name into Google. I did not know what I expected to find. Maybe a regular guy. Maybe someone who lived a couple of towns over and had been looking for me too. Maybe someone I could call and say, "Hey, I think we are related." Instead, I found an obituary. And not just any obituary, a full-page tribute in the Boston Globe. Charles Whitman, founder and CEO of Whitman Industrial Manufacturing, a self-made billionaire who started with nothing in a small town in Wisconsin and built an empire that employed over 13,000 people. A man who donated millions to veterans organizations and children's hospitals. A man who owned a yacht, a penthouse in downtown Boston, and a private vault filled with rare gold coins, a man who had died 10 weeks ago. Pancreatic cancer. He was 68 years old. I read the obituary 3 times. I studied the photo. They included a stern face, silver hair, broad shoulders. I looked for myself in his features. I found it in the jawline, in the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. This stranger who shared my blood had died before I ever knew he existed. I called Emily first. She answered on the second ring, and I could not even get the words out right. I just said, "You need to come to the shop." Something happened. She was there in 15 minutes. She read the obituary over my shoulder, her hand pressed against her mouth. When she finished, she said, "Logan, this is insane. What are you going to do?" I said, "I do not know." That night, I drove to my parents' house. I sat at their kitchen table, the same table where I had done homework as a kid and eaten birthday cake and learned to play cards, and I told them everything. My dad listened without interrupting. My mom held my hand the whole time. When I finished, she said, "Whatever you find out, it does not change who you are. You are our son. That is never going to change." My dad said, "But if you want to find out more, we will support you. We always knew this day might come." 3 days later, my phone rang, a Boston area code. I almost did not answer. A man's voice said, "Mr. Bennett, my name is Michael Carter. I am an attorney representing the estate of Charles Whitman. I apologize for the cold call, but I need to speak with you about an urgent matter. Is now a good time?" I said, "I guess so." Michael spoke slowly and clearly, like he had rehearsed what he was going to say. He told me that Charles Whitman had spent the final 5 months of his life searching for me. He had hired 3 different investigation firms. He had chased every lead, followed every trail, desperate to find the son he had fathered 35 years ago and never known. He found me 11 days before he died, and he immediately rewrote his will. Michael said, "Mr. Bennett, you have been named as the sole heir to Charles Whitman's estate. This includes his downtown Boston penthouse, his yacht currently docked in Palm Beach, Florida, his controlling stake in Whitman Industrial Manufacturing, and a private vault containing over $4 million in rare gold coins. The total value of the estate is approximately $100 million. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because it sounded so ridiculous. I said, "You have got the wrong person. I restore furniture in Kentucky. I drive a truck with 210,000 miles on it. You have made a mistake." Michael said, "We have confirmed the DNA match through independent testing. There is no mistake, Mr. Bennett. You are Charles Whitman's biological son, but there is something else you need to know." His voice got heavier, more serious. He said, 3 days before Mr. Whitman passed away, an emergency petition was filed to contest your inclusion in the will. Someone tried to have your name removed. They claimed the investigation that found you was based on fraudulent evidence. They claimed you were not really his son. My stomach dropped. I said, "Who would do that?" Michael paused. Then he said, "His wife, Elizabeth Whitman. She has been contesting the will since the day he died. She is claiming you have no legal right to the inheritance, and she is prepared to fight this in court for as long as it takes." I could not speak. A woman I had never met, a woman whose husband had just died, was trying to erase me from existence, trying to pretend I was never born. Michael said, "Mr. Bennett, I made a promise to your father on his deathbed. I promised him I would find you and make sure you received what he wanted you to have. I intend to keep that promise, but I need you to come to Boston. There are things you need to see, things you need to understand about why Elizabeth is doing this." I asked him what he meant. He said, "She is not just protecting the money, Mr. Bennett. She is protecting herself. And when you learn what she did 35 years ago, you will understand everything." I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. Outside my shop window, the sun was setting. The world looked exactly the same as it had that morning. But nothing was the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. A billionaire I never met had left me everything. His wife was trying to take it all away. And somewhere in the middle of this mess was the truth about why I was given up for adoption in the first place. I had to find out, even if it destroyed me. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Emily breathed softly beside me. My mind kept spinning through the same questions over and over. Why did my father wait until he was dying to look for me? Why did Elizabeth want me erased so badly? What happened 35 years ago that set all of this in motion? By morning, I had made my decision. I called Michael Carter at 8:00 sharp. He answered on the first ring like he had been waiting by the phone. I said, "I am coming to Boston. When can you meet?" He said, "I will clear my entire schedule. How soon can you get here?" I booked a flight for the next morning. I had never flown first class in my life. I had barely flown at all, but Michael had already arranged the ticket and sent it to my email. He said my father would have wanted it that way. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house. My mom was in the kitchen making coffee when I walked in. She took one look at my face and said, "You are going, are you not?" I nodded. I told her about the phone call with Michael, about the will, about Elizabeth trying to block me, about the $100 million that apparently belonged to me now. My mom sat down slowly at the kitchen table. She said, "Logan, that is more money than I can even imagine." I said, "I do not care about the money, Mom. I need to know why. Why did they give me up? Why did he wait so long to find me? Why is this woman trying to pretend I do not exist?" My dad walked in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. He had heard everything. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, his eyes steady and calm, the way they always were when things got serious. He said, "Son, whatever you find out in Boston, I want you to remember something. The past does not define you. The choices other people made do not define you. You define you. And nothing you learn about where you came from changes the man you have become. I felt tears burning in my eyes. I said, what if it changes how I see everything? What if the truth is worse than not knowing? My mom reached across the table and took my hand. She said, then you will deal with it the same way you have dealt with everything else in your life. One step at a time, and we will be right here when you get back. The next morning, Emily drove me to the airport. She held my hand the whole way. At the departure gate, she hugged me tight and said, find your answers, but do not forget who you are while you are looking. I said, I love you. She said, I love you too. Now go meet your past. The flight to Boston felt like it lasted forever. I watched the clouds pass beneath the window and tried to imagine what Charles Whitman had been like. I had spent hours reading about him, online articles about his business deals, profiles in Forbes, and Bloomberg photos of him at charity galas and industry conferences. In every picture, he looked powerful and controlled, a man who built things, a man who got what he wanted. But he did not get me. Not until it was too late. Michael Carter met me at his office on the 47th floor of a glass tower in downtown Boston. The reception area alone was bigger than my entire furniture shop. Everything was polished and gleaming. I felt like a trespasser in someone else's life. Michael was tall with silver hair and a firm handshake. His eyes were kind but serious. He led me into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and closed the door behind us. He said, thank you for coming, Mr. Bennett. I know this is not easy. I said, call me Logan and you are right. None of this feels real. Michael nodded. He slid a folder across the table toward me. Inside were documents, photographs, legal papers. He said, before we discuss the estate, there are things you need to understand about your father, about your mother, and about Elizabeth. I opened the folder. The first thing I saw was a photograph. A young woman with dark hair and sad eyes holding a newborn baby wrapped in a blue blanket. On the back, someone had written 2 words, Melissa and son. Michael said, that is your mother, Melissa Grant. She was 22 years old when you were born. She worked as a secretary at one of your father's factories. They had an affair. When she got pregnant, your father's parents threatened to disown him if he acknowledged the child. They were old money. They cared more about reputation than family. I stared at the photograph, at the woman who gave birth to me, at the baby in her arms who grew up to become me. I said, what happened to her? Michael's voice softened. He said, she took a payment from your father's family. She signed away her parental rights. She gave you up for adoption and disappeared. She died 5 years ago. Ovarian cancer. She was 53. I felt something crack inside my chest. Another door slamming shut. Another person I would never get to meet. Michael said, but before she died, she left something behind. Something your father found last year when he started searching for you. He reached into the folder and pulled out a wooden box. He set it on the table in front of me. He said, your mother wrote you a letter every year on your birthday. 35 letters. She never sent them because she legally could not contact you, but she kept writing anyway. She wanted you to know if you ever found her that she never stopped thinking about you. I put my hand on the box. It was warm beneath my fingers. Inside were 35 years of words from a woman I had never known. 35 years of love I had never felt. Michael said, your father found those letters 5 months before he died. That is when he became obsessed with finding you. He said he owed it to Melissa. He said he owed it to you. And he said he would never forgive himself for waiting so long. I looked up at Michael. I said, then why did Elizabeth try to stop him? Michael leaned back in his chair. His expression darkened. He said, because Elizabeth is the reason your father gave you up in the first place, and she spent 35 years making sure that secrets stayed buried. Michael told me everything. How Elizabeth had been my father's personal assistant when he was just starting to build his empire. How she was the one he confided in when Melissa got pregnant. How she convinced him that acknowledging an illegitimate child would destroy his reputation and tank his business before it even got off the ground. She helped him arrange the payment to Melissa. She helped him draft the documents that made me disappear. She was 23 years old, ambitious, and she saw an opportunity. If she made herself indispensable during my father's greatest crisis, he would never let her go. She was right. 15 years later, he married her. Michael said, "Elizabeth always knew about you. She knew that somewhere out there Charles Whitman had a son, and she spent 20 years making sure that son was never found." When my father got sick and started talking about finding me, Elizabeth panicked. She knew that if I was found, the truth would come out. She knew my father would realize that the woman sleeping beside him every night was the same woman who had convinced him to abandon his child. So she tried to stop the search. When that did not work, she tried to discredit the investigators. When that failed, she filed the emergency petition to remove my name from the will 3 days before my father died. She almost succeeded. Michael said my father was in hospice care when he found out what Elizabeth had done. He could barely lift his head off the pillow, but he made Michael drive to the facility that night. He grabbed Michael by the arm and said, "You find my son. You make sure he gets everything. Promise me, Michael. Promise me on your life." Michael promised. And he kept that promise. I asked Michael if there was any way to meet Elizabeth. He advised against it. The legal battle was ongoing. Anything I said could be used against me in court, but I did not care about the court. I did not care about the money. I needed to look into the eyes of the woman who had tried to erase me. Michael gave me the address of the Whitman estate in Massachusetts. He said, "I cannot stop you from going, but be careful. Elizabeth is not a woman who loses gracefully." I rented a car and drove north. The estate was about 2 hours outside the city, tucked away behind iron gates and old oak trees. The house was massive stone walls covered in ivy, a circular driveway with a fountain in the center, the kind of place that belonged in a magazine, not in real life. I rang the doorbell. A housekeeper answered and led me to a sitting room with velvet furniture and oil paintings on the walls. I waited for 10 minutes before Elizabeth walked in. She was tall and thin, with silver blonde hair pulled back in a tight knot. Her face was perfectly composed, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. She looked at me the way you look at a problem that needs solving. She said, "So you are the son?" I said, "And you are the woman who tried to make sure I never existed." She did not flinch. She sat down across from me and crossed her legs. She said, "I did what I had to do to protect my family." I said, "I was a baby. What threat could I possibly have been to you?" For the first time, her composure cracked. Just a little. A flicker of something in her eyes that might have been guilt or might have been exhaustion. She said, "You want to know why I did it? Fine, I will tell you. Because you were proof that I was never enough. Charles loved your mother. He never said it, but I could see it every time he got quiet. Every time November came around, that was the month you were born. He would get distant and sad, and I knew he was thinking about her, about you. I spent 20 years living in the shadow of a woman he knew for 6 months and a child he never met." I said, "That is not my fault." She said, "No, but you are the reminder." And I could not stand it. When he started looking for you, I knew everything would fall apart. He would find out that I helped him give you up. He would realize I had been lying to him for our entire marriage. He would hate me. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had shaped my entire existence without ever knowing me, who had decided before I was even born that I was a threat to be eliminated. I said he died looking for me. He spent his last breath making sure I was found. Whatever you did, it did not work. He chose me in the end. Elizabeth's face went pale. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to me. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. She said, "I know, and I have to live with that." She turned around and picked up a wooden box from a side table. She held it out to me. She said, "Charles found these last year. Your mother left them with her sister before she died. I suppose you should have them." I took the box. Inside were 35 envelopes, one for every year of my life. My mother's handwriting on each one. Elizabeth said she wrote to you every birthday. She never sent them because she signed away her rights, but she never stopped. I opened the first envelope. My hands were trembling. The letter inside was dated the day after I was born. It said, "To my son, on your first birthday, I am so sorry I could not keep you, but I want you to know that letting you go was the hardest thing I have ever done. I think about you every single day. I imagine you learning to walk. I imagine you laughing. I hope whoever is raising you loves you as much as I do, because I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anything. Happy birthday, my sweet boy. Love your mother." I read those words, and something broke open inside me. 35 years of wondering if I was wanted. 35 years of questions I never asked because I was afraid of the answers. And here they were written in my mother's hand. Proof that I was never forgotten. Proof that I was loved from the very beginning. I looked up at Elizabeth. She was watching me with an expression I could not read. I said, "Thank you for giving me these." She said nothing. I walked out of that house and never looked back. I flew back to Kentucky the next day. Emily picked me up from the airport, and I did not say a word the entire drive home. I just held her hand and watched the familiar landscape pass by outside the window. The cornfields, the old barns, the water tower with our town's name painted on the side. Everything looked the same, but I was different. I could feel it in my bones. That night I sat at our kitchen table and read every single one of my mother's letters, all 35 of them. She wrote about her hopes for me. She wrote about the guilt she carried. She wrote about watching other children on the street and wondering if any of them were me. She wrote about the day she signed the papers giving me up, how she sobbed so hard the nurses had to sedate her. She wrote about forgiving my father even though it took her 20 years. In her final letter, written just 6 months before she died, she said something that changed everything for me. She wrote, "I do not know if you will ever read these words. I do not know if you are happy or sad, rich or poor, married or alone. But I want you to know that giving you up did not mean I did not want you. It meant I wanted more for you than I could give. I was young and scared and broke, and your father's family made it clear there was no place for us in his world. So I let you go. And I have spent every day since hoping that you landed somewhere soft, somewhere full of love. I hope you found your people, my sweet boy. I hope they made you feel chosen because you were. You were chosen by me to have a better life, and you were chosen by them to be their son. That is not abandonment. That is love working overtime." I cried for an hour after I read that letter. I cried for the mother I never knew. I cried for the father who found me too late. I cried for the 35 years of silence that could have been filled with her voice. But somewhere in the middle of all that grief, I found peace. The legal battle with Elizabeth lasted another 4 months. In the end, she dropped her challenge. Michael told me she accepted a settlement from the estate enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life, but a fraction of what she had hoped to keep. She moved to France. I never spoke to her again. I do not hate her. I understand that fear makes people do terrible things, but I do not forgive her either. Some wounds do not need to be forgiven. They just need to be acknowledged and carried forward. I accepted the inheritance, all $100 million of it, but not for myself. I sold the yacht. I sold the penthouse. I put the gold coins up for auction at a house in Boston, Massachusetts. I used the money to create something my father never had the chance to build, a foundation called the Bennett Whitman Fund. It provides scholarships for adoptees who want to go to college. It helps families afford the cost of adoption so more kids can find homes. It funds research into genetic diseases so other families do not have to lose their loved ones the way I lost mine. I kept my father's company, Whitman Industrial Manufacturing. I do not run it myself. I hired people smarter than me to handle the day-to-day operations. But I sit on the board. I make sure the employees are treated well. I make sure my father's legacy is something worth protecting. And I kept my furniture shop, Second Life Furniture. I still go in every morning at 6:30. I still drink my coffee black. I still sand down old tables and restore broken chairs. The work keeps me grounded. It reminds me who I am and where I came from. Every Sunday, Emily and I still drive to my parents' house for dinner. My mom still makes pot roast. My dad still tells the same stories. And now sometimes I tell stories too. Stories about Charles and Melissa. Stories about the life I might have had and the life I actually got. My mom said something to me a few weeks after I came back from Boston. She said, "You have 2 families now, Logan, and both of them love you." She was right. I have the family that raised me and the family that gave me away. I have David and Carol who chose me when I was 3 days old and never stopped choosing me. And I have Charles and Melissa who loved me from a distance and spent their whole lives wishing things had been different. I used to think being adopted meant something was missing, a hole in my story that could never be filled. But I was wrong. Being adopted means being wanted twice. Once by the people who gave you life, and once by the people who gave you everything else. If you are watching this and you have ever wondered where you came from, I want you to know something. The answers might not be what you expect. They might be painful. They might be complicated. They might change everything you thought you knew about yourself. But they are worth finding because the truth, no matter how hard it is, sets you free. And you deserve to be free. I was adopted at birth and never knew my real family. At 36, I found all of them at once. One had already died. One left me letters I will treasure until my last breath. One tried to erase me from existence, and 2 raised me with more love than I ever knew was possible. That is my story. And for the first time in my life, I finally know the whole thing. I am Logan Bennett. I am a furniture restorer from Lexington, Kentucky. I am also the son of a billionaire I never met, and a mother who never stopped writing to me. I am proof that family is not just about blood. It is about showing up. It is about choosing each other. It is about love that refuses to quit. And I am finally at peace with every single part of it. If this story touched your heart, I would love for you to hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment below and tell me your story. I read every single one. And if you have not already, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another video. Your support means the world to me. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next.